Welcome back to the Policy Viz podcast. I'm your host, Jon Schwabish. I have a very special guest this week on the show, my good friend, Giorgia Lupi. You certainly know her name from the Dear Data Project, from her work at Pentagram, and possibly from her latest book, a data visualization and a data book for kids. This is me and only me. I invited Giorgia to talk about her work on that book, how she thinks about communicating and working with kids in and around data, and of course, lots of other things that she's working on. We talk about her recent piece in the New York Times. We talk about her thoughts around data humanism, particularly as it relates to kids. And we talk about all the things that she's worked on, the fashion work that she's done, the data rugs that she's done, tiles she's done, illustrations she's done. Giorgia is a force of nature, a force for good in the data visualization community. I'm so grateful she was able to take time out of her schedule to join me for this exciting conversation. So make sure you check out all of Giorgia's work on her site, on the Pentagram site. Lots of places to learn more about what Giorgia does and the types of work that she creates. And of course, check out her new book, This Is Me and Only Me, on Amazon or Goodreads or wherever you get your books. So I'm not going to waste any more time. This is a great conversation. Super fun to talk with Giorgia again. So here we go. Here's my conversation with Giorgia Lupi on the Policy Viz podcast. Holy moly, the one and only Giorgia Lupi. I wish I had a good rhyme for that. Hi, Giorgia. So good to see you.
Hi, John. It's really good to see you.
I was thinking this morning, prior to the pandemic, I was coming up to New York fairly often. I felt like I was seeing you like every few months. We would like grab lunch, and then the pandemic hit, and now I've gotten to see you. We've talked like 3 times in the last couple months for various things. It's great to see you. Loving the stuff that you are working on, and you've got a new book coming out for kids, which is super exciting.
Yes.
Do we want to do like a Giorgia Lupi retrospective? Because we were just talking right before. You were like first guest on the podcast. So that was like a decade ago. So we've got a lot to cover.
Yeah, this is pretty exciting. And you've done 20 million episodes in between. You're very prolific.
It's like, yeah, I feel like I've talked to, not quite everybody I want to talk to. There's still some names out there I want to get a hold on. But yeah,
I'm really honored to be back.
Well, I'm so grateful that you can take some time. So where do you want to start? Do you want to talk about maybe moving from Accurate over to Pentagram to start?
Yeah.
Like, because I think when you were last on the podcast, you were at Accurate, you were running Accurate, and now you're at Pentagram, and I think people would be curious to hear maybe what you're working on there and maybe how you've just changed or evolved in your thinking around data and data visualization over the last 10 years. Because I'm sure I know you've done all the data humanism stuff and you've done, you've done, everybody's listening to this show knows all of your great work, but maybe the thread here would be to hear about how you've changed your thinking about communicating data over the last decade or so.
Of course. Well, and also maybe let's not assume that everybody knows who I am and what I do.
Okay, all right, okay. See, that's what I love about you. Like, the humility is just, yeah. All right, go ahead.
I am Giorgia, and at this point, John, we're close friends. I think we can say we go way back.
Yep.
And I'm Italian originally, but I moved to New York in 2012. So at this point, I call New York home. And I've been working with data in various capacities from a design perspective since a couple of years after I graduated architecture. So I'm not a trained statistician, data scientist, or even, at this point, there are information design courses at universities and data visualization courses. I came from a completely different background. And so my approach to data, especially at the beginning when with my partners at Accurate, the company that I co-founded back in Italy in 2011, nobody was a data specialist. Like the person that I used to work with the closest was Simone, a sociologist. And so we started to work with data really asking ourselves questions that are fundamentally about human nature and society and relationship and behaviors, because he was the one driving the content. And we've been working on a bunch of editorial projects when we really had the chance to, again, choose the stories and go and find and combine data. And also on the other end, because again, nobody was also using any D3 libraries or Tableau or softwares
Right.
that would give us shortcuts to produce data visualization, we also like really created what I call visual models from scratch. And so you'll see those data visualizations back then in 2011 that were very articulate, unusual. You had to kind of like read the legend to understand it. And so that's kind of
Yeah.
like the beginning of my love story with data. And more in the in the years to come at Accurate, of course, we started to have bigger clients. We hired software developers, and we worked more digitally and less manually in a way, positioning elements from Excel to Illustrator, but really actually,
Hmm.
working at a scale in a way, which is something I've loved. And but I still think that the approach that shaped my relationship with data is still the one that I started with, even with big data and corporate clients, and all of that. Now, I'll make it short, and then we can go in depth into whatever you feel it's helpful. In 2019, I actually had a shift of a career after almost 10 years at Accurate, and I joined Pentagram. And Pentagram is a big independent graphic design firm. We have offices in New York and London, Berlin, and Austin. And Pentagram is absolutely not known for data visualization. The bread and
Hmm.
butter is brand identity. And so really creating logos and shaping how brands, which are, any kind of company in a way, present themselves into the world, reposition themselves where there's a moment when they have to reach a new audience or change the way they operate. Also, Pentagram's well known for exhibition design, campaign design, titles for movies and shows. And so,
Right.
really, kind of like the more traditional way of communicating. And
Hmm.
I joined a bit as an outlier, but like happily so, because I really believe that right now, and that is really what moved me, data can become a language that everybody could speak, and it can become a powerful language for brands to express in themselves. Because if you think about it, virtually every client at Pentagram work with data and has to communicate data. But a lot of the time, data visualization is just an aftermath of a branding exercise, and it's not taken as seriously as the core values of the company and the brand. So I'm very excited to be working in this space together with honing in on the storytelling aspect that I've always been interested in. And so we've been working on
Hmm.
a lot of campaigns and projects that are true, communication design. And on the other hand, I've also worked on some fun projects such as a fashion collection that have data patterns on it, a data
Hmm.
rug, some tiles that have been manufactured really nicely that have data patterns. So yeah, I mean, I've been speaking a lot already. I'll pause here. That's the past 15 years in a nutshell.
15 years of Giorgia Lupi's career in 30 seconds. Yeah. So so there's a lot we could talk about. So I guess the one, so there are two parts of that description that I found really interesting. One is on the storytelling piece, and the other one is on data as a language. Um, and I'm curious how you and the folks you work with think about data storytelling, right? So one of the arguments that I've made over the last few years is we kind of throw around this word stories with data a lot, and really at the end it's like it's a line chart. Like I'm not sure that's a story the way we would like really think about a story, but the a lot of the work that Pentagram does is bigger and broader and working with larger projects. And so when you work with folks there who are traditionally have been telling stories, sort of traditional stories, but now you're weaving in the data, how do you have those conversations? What do those projects look like?
Sure. And as for a clarification, so Petram is made of different partners, and every partner has their own set of
Mm.
clients, skill sets, and teams. So we pretty much function as independent
Oh,
studios. So
interesting.
yeah, long story short, I most of the time operate by myself and with my team within the
Hmm.
Pentagram platform, but I've collaborated with other partners for a specific project that
Oh,
benefited
interesting.
from having, say, somebody who's been doing traditional big branding for universities, for example, and myself
Right.
doing stuff. So there's collaboration, but also I'm very independent, which is
Oh,
to me also
interesting.
the beauty of Pentagram in a way.
Yeah.
And I would like to really talk about what does it even mean to tell stories with data. I think it can
Yeah.
mean many different things as long as the data points themselves are not just crude and cold numbers. Because I think I
Mm,
agree. A line chart tells a story, but I think from a design perspective, authorial perspective in a way, if you can add, and this is my whole spiel about data humanism that I do all the time,
yeah.
context, personal details, maybe if you have the opportunity to connect a bigger trend that can look like a line chart with some points in that trend that can talk about the individual data points, the human being that is behind that, the particular location of that climate change impact in a way, or something that
Hmm.
is really a little bit more relatable. To me, that is when we start to talk about telling stories with data. And
Hmm.
how my practice has evolved, I think over time I've paradoxically became less focused on data itself, but really just focusing on, okay, I'm primarily a designer. My favorite tool or material is data. There's a power in data, but primarily it is really about communicating a message, sharing a feeling of, say, for campaigns, in a way we want people to relate, to say wow, to want to participate to the cause. And I feel that sometimes data can just be the anchoring point to then
Hmm.
expand into stories that don't necessarily have to be data driven. And this is really just my evolution, and I don't think that there's a right or wrong way to do it, but I feel that personally, I thought I've been doing a lot of data visualizations my whole career, and I feel like
Yeah.
I like now to expand. And I mean, if you look at the wall behind me, your listeners will not see it, but it's like full of pure data visualizations, and
Right.
that's still my passion. But I like to think about data in a bit of a broader way now.
Yeah. And so how do you and your team think about getting those stories? This is something that comes up a lot when I talk to,
Yes.
quantitative data analysts or scientists or researchers who want to do all the things that you just mentioned, right? They want to enrich their visualizations or their charts with these stories or experiences. And so how do you practically go about doing that?
I mean, I feel that I do have most of the time the luxury of being together with the people that shape the story themselves and shaping them together in terms of the collaboration with my client. So it's pretty
Hmm.
rare that a client comes to me with a data set and wants to visualize the data set, period. Because in those occasions, I feel, you can try to push to add external data sets and extra context, and you can try to push to make it less of a dashboard but more of a, just for this, I'm simplifying for the sake of making
Yeah.
myself
Yeah. Yeah.
understood, more of a scrolly telling piece if it's
Hmm.
digital, or before you get to the interactive tableau map, whatever it is, you have some context and intros and explanations and
Mm.
personal anecdotes or whatever it is. Sometimes you just cannot do it, and I feel that it's
Yeah.
also okay sometimes to just have a chart. The chart, it's what it is. But
Right.
I can make a couple of examples of projects where, to me, we've been doing true storytelling with data. One recent one is an article that I, with my team, published on the New York Times. It's a visual op-ed that is about something personal, which is my journey with my health, which hasn't been really kind to me in the past 4 years. I've been suffering, and now I want to say I am recovering from long COVID, which is, maybe at this point people know what long COVID is, but are the health consequences that might take many forms and shape and degrees of severity following a COVID infection. Most people right now, get COVID, don't even think about it, and they get back to their lives and they're fine. But for some of us, that hasn't been the story. And so I've been
Hmm.
battling with physical limitations, con- continuous flowing of symptoms of different kinds 24/7 pretty much for the past 4 years, and really then
Mm.
interfacing myself with healthcare, doctor's appointments, scans, lab tests, therapies, injection, infusion, different medication, treatments. And of course, I've collected a lot of data about it because this is what I do. And at some point, looking at the long COVID stories that were out there, I decided to try and publish something, because the stories that I saw, and I think this is important in terms of what data can do. The story that I saw published were, very moving, but at the same time, you would just read a blog post or an article, and you'd read a list of 10 symptoms, 15 symptoms. And I think that for a healthy person, these might have felt like Well, okay, I'm tired as well after work. Sure, I have headaches
Yeah,
too. Okay, yeah,
right.
sometimes nauseous, but that is so far away from the experience of living 24/7 with a chronic illness. Like the term
Yeah.
fatigue doesn't even start to describe the crushing impossibility to move your body that happens. So, long story short, with all the data that I collected day by day, that were a mix of real observation of quantitative lab tests, the biometrics from my smartwatch that were all off, but also the nuanced qualitative symptoms that I was experiencing every day, my limitation, and all of that. I thought that telling a story that could be a complete account day by day of my 4 years could really shine a light onto what it means to live with this condition. So I think the power of storytelling with data sometimes can really just actually shine a light on the granular versus the aggregate.
Right.
You can link it in the show notes or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, I absolutely will. And I want to ask you about that piece since you brought it up. I mean, I can imagine a lot of people, and a lot of people do collect their own personal data about lots of different things. And a lot of people would present it as a bar chart or a line chart, right? I'm thinking about, the sort of folks that I work with, right? Other economists and social scientists, right? They make a bar chart. But the way you presented that information was these little, I guess, paintbrush strokes sort of
Hmm.
thing. And I'm curious what you would say to someone who looks at that and says, "Oh, I've collected my health information or my exercise information, but my instinct is just to create a bar chart." But what
Yeah.
would you say to someone who says, "Yeah, I'd make a bar chart, but I want to be more creative. I want to engage people the way you were able to engage
Hmm.
millions of people with that piece."
Yeah.
I'm guessing you wouldn't recommend everybody go out and get a degree in design, but like
No.
what would you say to someone who wants to make something engaging but doesn't know how to get
Well,
started?
totally. I mean, I think that honestly, not everything needs to be necessarily engaging to a point that you've never seen something like that before. I think
Right.
personally, the reason why I decided to go for this painted brush language is I've been thinking about what do I want this piece to do, and I've had the opportunity to do it in the New York Times, and so of course the visibility was has been pretty like wide in a way.
Yeah.
And my main goal, in a way, was actually to make people feel something, which it's a lot. It's in a lot of my projects, and I feel that because my story was so personal, but I hoped that it could, first of all, make the people that could see that are suffering from long COVID or any other chronic illness feel seen and understood, and not so alone. Because the experience of a chronic illness is the most lonely thing to me that you can think about in general. Health scares or health problems, as much as you have family around you and all of that, it's the loneliest place because your body
Mm,
fails you. You are so uncertain in terms of what's going to happen in the future. You're not yourself anymore. So there's this
right.
aspect, and I wanted people to just feel seen and recognized and validated. And on the other end, I wanted for people that didn't know what long COVID was to for a second try to immerse themselves in the world of constant daily litany of ailments to your body.
Right.
So to me, like the language of these repetitive paint brushes that actually start with the piece in a way that it's not even a data visualization. You start to see colored paint brushes that are interacting with the text and highlighting the symptoms that I'm describing in different colors. So you start to understand that a paintbrush is probably a symptom and a different color is a different
Mm-hmm.
kind of symptom. And then, slowly you build this calendar of like never ending
You're
scrolling
right. Yeah.
of days in a way. And I feel that I decided for that language because of my goals in a way. And
Mm,
so that long explanation that I gave is to say that I don't think that necessarily everybody needs to paint data in an artistic way.
yeah.
It needs to somehow just fulfill the purpose. And I feel that some other times having a graphically rigid geometric bar chart can also be the solution, because if you want to communicate a certain level of trust, rigor, institutional knowledge, I don't think that a paintbrush is probably the best way to do it, because it does communicate evolution, nuance, uncertainty, imperfection. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
if I have to really abstract it, I really suggest really truly ask yourself what is that you want to communicate, what is that you want people to feel and to understand. and then trying to experiment and see if, going a bit out of the usual ways of depicting data can be helpful. I think that like maybe people
Yeah.
depict me as somebody who hates bar charts and pie charts. I don't, like, I have nothing against it.
Uh, yeah, you have the early work and accurate. I always whenever I think of your early work and accurate is always like stuff that's like at a 45-degree angle, right? These like really intricate, big
I
pieces.
still remember at a Visualize conference you were speaking after me, and you were making your examples, and at some point you were talking about a problem that you had with a client or whatever, or like a challenge, and then
Yeah. Yep.
you fill the screen of the next slide with tilted small multiples of
Yep.
WWGLD. What will Giorgia Lupi do? And I am still laughing about that, and the whole audience was laughing. But just take 45 degrees and you'll get
Yeah, just
it.
45 degrees. Just a lot of them, 45 degrees. Yeah, yeah, that was a fun talk. Yes. Um so um there are two things I want to talk about, but I think maybe we switch gears to talk about your latest project, because
Yes.
it's interesting hearing you talk about stories and now having a kid's book coming out, the next couple of weeks. Because when I think about stories, that's my first thought. It's like, okay, so how would my kids or any kids think about, what is a story, right?
Yeah.
And so, and of course, just for folks who don't know, your project with Stephanie Posovic, the Dear Data project, there is, for folks who don't know, there is like a little mailing list of people who are working in doing Dear Data, and they're mostly educators. And I always find it fun to find like an email show up. It's like, hey, I'm a teacher in Austin, Texas, and I'm doing Dear Data with my
Yes.
class. And I would say like, yeah, 90% of the emails that show up are educators. So I guess my question is like, where did the idea for the kids book come? What was the inspiration for it? And for folks who don't know, like, what is the book about?
Yeah. So the book will be out in a couple weeks, and it's called "This Is Me and Only Me," and it's a collaboration with my co-author Maddie Gardner, who also has been working with me at Pentagram, and she was a preschool teacher before becoming a project
Mm,
manager. So it's been really lovely to work with her as somebody that really knows and understands kids. So the book is a picture book for children, and if I have to take a step back, I would say that definitely, the origin of all of this was Dear Data, which is an
yeah.
experiment that Stephanie and I have done with extensive personal data collection for 52 weeks, mailing a data postcard back and forth every week from London to New York and New York to London. Where really in 52 weeks, we've explored pretty much everything about ourselves. And so
Hmm.
noticing our behavior, our thoughts, our environment, what makes us happy, what makes us sad, and pretty much painting a portrait of the other person through this only layer of data. Then people got excited, as you mentioned, educators wanted to experiment with kids in terms of like making them observe reality through this data lens, which again, it's not only how many time a certain things, but like qualities and human questions related to it, such as what was I feeling, what was the
Hmm.
context, and why. And on the other hand, also using it as a tool for creativity, being a little less afraid of the white page and working with quantities and
Yeah.
numbers and symbols. So the second iteration of Dear Data also was a journal called Observe, Collect, Draw that Stephanie and I published in, if I remember correctly, 2017 or 2018, a couple of years after Dear Data, really because we got so many requests of like teaching workshops and how can we do it. And so we did this journal that made this kind of observation actionable. There's
Mm,
exercises and gridded pages for you to fill in with symbols of your own making sometimes or suggested by us. And that got pretty popular too. And I think that really honestly from that time on, so it's been like a bit of an idea that was in the back of my mind for the past 5 or however many years. I always thought, this will be such a nice story for a picture book. And my idea has
mm,
always been pretty simple, starting with a inanimate object of any kind, whether it's a circle, a rock, anything. I didn't even think about the
mhm.
visual language then. And then the more these entity observe things around them and about them, the more this becomes this colorful portrait that makes this human being them and only.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just really the origin. And then, long story short, I talked
Yeah.
about it with Maddie, who has much more knowledge about children than I do. I don't have children, and I also have not, grown up with children around me. I'm an only child. My parents were both only children, so
Mm.
there's no nephews, nieces, anybody,
Right.
in
Right.
me. And so we collaborated really in really figuring out what can be some aspects of collecting data that can really resonate with kids. So pretty much
Yeah.
the book starts with uh, a a hollowed circle that has a black outline, and it starts by saying this is me and only me, and you flip the pages and you start to see that it starts to add these colored symbols on the days when I'm happy, different symbols on the days when I'm sad, and
Yeah.
going on and starting to add more details, interacting with people, observing also the feelings in them that might be a little confused if you don't stop and actually acknowledge and name them, and really in the end building a beautiful portrait of what makes you you. So it's pretty
Mm.
simple idea in the end. I hope it's
Yeah.
it can, and something that might inspire not only young kids, but I've always wanted to make this book that adults feel like, oh, this is interesting too.
Right. But what's interesting about the way you describe that book is I like do you view it as a data book or as a data viz book for kids?
I don't, to the point that we don't mention the word. I'll take it back. I don't, to the point that we don't mention the word data until the very end. The last page is a bit of an explanation that said all that you've seen so far can be called data. But I think that this is an invitation to observe, and it is an invitation to actually also start to like yourself for who you are and the things that
Mm.
make you you.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, no, I really don't see it necessarily as a data book. And I have been very opposed when some publishers suggested that in the end we add some activities, because to me,
Mm-hmm.
this is an invitation. It needs to be inspiring. I've already done a journal and a like kind of like classroom kind of a book, and I've
Right.
really pushed back in making it become a data viz book. I really
Yeah.
want it to be a story.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. I'm very excited to get my hands on it. So did you? And I'm excited to hear that Maddie is a was a preschool teacher, because I think that brings in like that to your point from earlier. Like that's the experience that you need to understand who you're communicating with and communicating, for. But
Yes.
did you? Have you tested it? Like, did you bring it into classrooms or give it to kids? Like, what? Because you know, I'm sure with other things that you've written, you send it out to people to like peer review and that sort of thing. But like for kids, did you like? How did you do that?
We did. We did do some sort of like informal, very anecdotal testing around us, and
Yeah.
our publisher also. So the publisher is Corraini, is an Italian publisher that I really love working with. They are the original publisher of all Bruno Munari's book, and they've been publishing these beautiful books that are artistic, poetic, and design oriented. And the editor that has been working with us is very she works on children's book a
Yeah.
lot, and it's been
Yeah.
very helpful too. And we've tested it with the kids around us that could
Yeah.
as some feedback. And I think what I've liked to observe is how, so the book is not illustratively figurative in a way that all the representations are abstract. We don't see animals or flowers or things like that.
Right.
Everything is abstract. And maybe the concern that I had in the beginning is, will kids relate? But turns out that at least in our little experience so far, and again, the book's not out publicly yet,
Right.
so we'll see what uh, parents and children think. But really, is that with this abstract way, like every time that you go back, you can see different things, and there's like little
Mm-hmm.
as you go through the book that make you explain what that actually have you understand what is that symbol, what is this other, and I think that in the end, that abstract representation could be just really a way to foster imagination even more, and hopefully something that kids want to get back to. It's almost like the difference
Yeah.
between a written book and a movie. And sometimes you want a movie because you like to just see what the author thought in terms of what does that character have to look like. But some other times
You're
I think
right.
you also want to imagine.
Right. Right. The way you describe it also feels to me very consistent with your general approach to data, and particularly with the data humanism. I mean, it feels like it sounds like what you're trying to accomplish with this book is to get kids to, or not to get kids, but to encourage kids to feel comfortable with themselves, comfortable with other people, and sort of kind of, in some ways, kind of like see people behind the data for, I'll use that term loosely in this context. Is that like, do you feel like that's where you need to start with kids?
Well, again, I think I don't have kids, so I'm not necessarily the best person
Yeah.
to talk about that. But I was a kid myself, and I was a bit of a
Right.
nerd kid, just collecting stuff, and
Yeah.
But I also know that if there's something that kids really have that maybe we all lost, it is the power of imagining. And so I think
Mm.
the imagination of what every kid can see in those symbols and how they can actually translate it to things in their lives. And I feel that the inspiration of saying, oh, I had never really paid attention on what's happening on the bus on my way to school. And, this
Mm.
is really an invitation to observe in very different areas of your life, even the one that seems the most mundane. And I feel that
Hmm.
this is a direct correlation with dear data, and something that I can't stop thinking since Stephanie and I almost 10 years ago at this point
Yeah.
started the project, is that we always, and this is has nothing to do with design or data, it's really have to do with life. We tend to remember and look forward to the big grandiose event, and instead like the beauty of the daily details of the most mundane things just like get lost. And when you learn
Yeah.
to pay attention, I mean, now I don't want to sound like a meditation, mindfulness, preaching or anything
Right.
like that.
Right.
But I think that learning to open your eyes, and as opposed to going about your life with a spotlight onto what you're thinking, but really just shining a lantern on what's going around you, it's such a most
Hmm.
beautiful way to sometimes go about your life. And I think it's something that has helped me and has been helping me even with this illness to try and think
Yeah.
about. It's very easy to point my focus, for example, and this is an extreme situation, but I feel that everybody might feel like that for other aspects of their life. It's very focused to just it's very easy to focus on what's wrong on my body, what I can't do, what are my symptoms
Right.
right now, what is the fear that I have about whether I'm going to pay for these later, or whatever it is that's going on. But instead, if I stop and every time I remind myself I'm here in this room, there's all these beautiful things around me. Today is a day where I've been able actually to accomplish X, Y, and Z, as opposed to thinking
Hmm.
about what I don't have. I mean, does it cure my illness? No, but it makes everything a little bit more bearable.
Yeah.
And again, this is an extreme example, but you have to really learn to pay attention, which is something that they should teach in school, I think.
Yes, patience and gratitude. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that would be really helpful. Do you, if you had, if you were the, I don't know what they call it in New York, but if you were the superintendent of the New York City schools,
Hmm.
would you, and you can model it on the Giorgia Lupi corpus of works out there. Do you think that your projects kind of work together in sort of a data curriculum? I would say I don't have the book yet, so I'm like waiting. So yeah, there it is. Yeah, so like, but I can imagine the way you've described that book. It feels like it's for the younger kids, right? I don't know if what you have in mind, like 3 to 6, 3 to 7, something
I
like
was
that.
thinking more like 5 to 10, perhaps
Okay,
five to
so
eight.
5 to 10.
Maybe like I think like 4 to 8, perhaps.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. So then those like 8, 9, 10 year olds are in the age group where they can start doing like the early deer data stuff, right? So that's like observe, collect, draw, and then you
Yeah.
get a little bit older and you have like the teenage kids who could do like the deer data stuff the way you and Stephanie did it, where they're collecting their own data. Like, do you
Yeah.
think if you could build that curriculum, do you think we'd have a population of young adults who are more data literate? Do you think they would just be more creative? Do you think they'd just be more able to observe the world around them? What do you think? Where would that like high school graduate be if that was
Yeah. So
their curriculum?
that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. And I feel, let's say that my ambition has never been to completely feel the first grade to
Right.
10th,
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah. I'm just
and
giving you more things to do. That's all.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, but it's interesting because it's true. I think, this is me and only me. It's just an introduction to being inspired by who you are and what's around you. And also, of course, starting to make you think that not all the stories needs to be completely figurative, or maybe I'm missing a word in English, like really representative of
Right.
reality. And that
Yeah.
there's a certain element of visual going out there and thinking about something different that can happen. And then you're right. Observe, collect, draw can start to be exercises that can teach you both to observe, but also to start and translate
Mm-hmm.
numbers of things that you've collected into symbol. And then there start to be lengths and colors for categories and sizes and positioning on the page. And so you know me, John, I've never been like a didactic academic
Yeah.
teacher. And I think that that is a little bit of my way of teaching, just making you think about how you could do those things, and then you learn by yourself. And I feel that Dear Data, maybe it's that more poetic, oh, I can be very creative with data, and if these people send each other postcards, maybe at this point I can write a love letter with data, or
Right.
build a sweater that has data in. So I think that it's a little bit more like, okay, and now you can expand.
Yeah.
Now I don't even know if I mentioned it, but I am co-authoring another book that maybe is for the
Oh.
next step. This is going to be out in 2025, so I don't speak a
Okay.
ton about it. And it's like I love working with co-authors. If you haven't seen the trend, and I'm working with my dear collaborator at Pentagram, strategist Philip Cox, who's I've been working with me at Pentagram for the longest time since I joined. He's been with me and is fantastic. And we are working on a book that is called, provisional title, Speak Data, which is for the first time a bit of a textbook, and it's filled with interviews with people that are not necessarily data expert, but artists, meteorologists, healthcare practitioners, and people in all different fields that tangentially have touched upon data. So it is a
Mm.
way to actually start to think about data as a language that can touch every aspect in a way of the world that we live in. And it's a little bit more of a, let's say, we've been thinking about it like a guide that if you don't know anything about data but want to have a dinner conversation that is informed, at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that too. So I think I'm
There's that
covering the
too.
whole.
You've got like the world according to Georgia, like all the way through
Yeah,
K to 22. It's not often there's breaking news on this podcast, but I'm glad to
that's a
have
breaking
like
news.
yeah, breaking news. Yeah. Well, that's really exciting. I mean, I think yeah, all together there is this. I can see this sort of thread that pulls. I mean, obviously pulls through your work, but just on like helping kids as they age, as they grow, to think about their own data and their own identities, and then the world around them in this sort of broader way. Um, and to hear you speak about your own health issues over the last few years, like with this patience and gratitude for what can be, as opposed to what is sort of you know bad and negative. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's really exciting.
It is. Yeah, no, I mean, John, I feel like we've never, or like maybe nobody ever thinks that they are prolific enough or that they are accomplished
Mm.
enough or productive enough. But I think maybe if I pause, at least I know that I have been putting out pretty much all the ideas and thoughts that I had. Now, are they helpful for the world? I don't know, but at least I know that I'm trying to sort of like keep experimenting. And one thing that I feel that, I mean, maybe you look at my work and it looks all the same, but I've kept from the beginning really wanting to experiment with new challenges, new mediums, new type of data, new outputs, new type of clients. I don't think that I'll be fulfilled if I kept doing the editorial data visualization for the main Italian newspaper like I've done, like I feel
Yeah.
really, to me, expanding and even going out of my comfort zone. I mean, now I'm a partner at a branding agency. I'm working on branding projects. It's fun. It
Right.
doesn't necessarily always have data in it. When I can, we do use data, but I'm even learning how to just get completely out of the comfort zone of having numbers to visualize, but really instead
Right.
think about messages and how do they translate into a symbol that has no data points behind it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the what in my experience of having done this now, right? So, episode 1 you were on, and now episode, I don't even know what number this is, 260 something. Like, there's been an evolution in the field and the evolution in the way people have approached data. Not just from an individual perspective, but the way we get data now, the tools we use, the platforms we use. So I think it's really interesting to see people evolve and change in their approach to data and their approach to visualization. And now by like in another year, we'll have the entire Giorgia Lupi like literature to take us all the way through from birth to young adulthood.
yeah. And then I'll retire.
And then you'll need to write a book like Data Viz for retirees or something like that. You
Yes,
need to
exactly.
help people get ready for retirement. So um Georgia, thanks so much for coming on the show. It is always great to see you. Congrats
Really.
on the new book and the forthcoming book. I can't wait to see them. And I will put links to all the stuff that we've talked about, all the Dear Data stuff and the data humanism stuff and pentagram stuff, so people can reach out and find you. So again, thanks so much for coming on the show. Always great to see you.
Thank you, John. It was so fun. Such a pleasure as always.
Thanks for everyone for tuning into this week's episode of the show. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I hope you'll check out all of Georgia's work. I've got links in the show notes to the many things that we talked about, ranging from her Dear Data book all the way to her new book, This Is Me and Only Me, and a range of other projects and products that she has worked on over the years. Before you go, as you're tuning out, as you're getting ready to move on to your next podcast, if you could just take a second to rate or review this show on your favorite podcast provider. You can also check out the video version of the show over on my YouTube channel. And as always, check out lots of great content when it comes to your data visualization work over on my website, policyviz.com. So until next time, this has been the PolicyViz podcast. Thanks so much for listening.